Okay, welcome back. We're in Unit 3, video number 8, and in this video we're going to talk about a term called impression management. Impression management actually is a phenomenon that is going to exist whether we're in the interaction order or in social institutions, which is not drawn up there right now, but we're going to be getting to that in the next video. I put it here because I think it's a little bit easier to see it here. So the idea behind impression management, the basic concept is, I spent the entire last video talking about how we're constantly conforming. Every situation we're in where we're with other people, we're conforming either to scripts, if we don't know them very well, or group expectations if we do. And what the model of a person that sort of communicates is that we are just kind of passively assessing what's going on around us, and then figuring out what we conform to, and then conforming. And I want to suggest that that's only part of the picture. And this part of the picture isn't super happy, but at least gives you a more, I think, realistic idea of what's actually happening in those situations. So the idea is impression management. And what I've done here is I'm going to use the word draw. I mean, this is just, I wrote impression management underneath conformity for this reason. So conformity is what we see. We can sort of think about this as being on the surface. You see people conforming. But what is happening underneath, which is why it's underneath, is impression management. Impression management is basically our attempts to put it all that not very kindly, to manipulate other people into thinking something about us. What you want to think about is you are managing other people's impression of you. The definition that I want to give you, this is defined slightly differently in the book, but it basically is, it is the exact same idea. Impression management is using symbols to influence how other people define you. Now, I use that definition, using symbols to influence how other people define you, because it puts it back in the context of all people holding meaning to other people. What we're trying to do right now, when we think about impression management, is I know that you are going to define me in a certain way. And therefore, what I want to do is try to influence what that definition of me is. I want you to have a certain definition of me, you to attach certain meaning to me. And so what I'm going to do is try to manipulate you, influence you in one way or another. The way I do that is by using symbols. Now, the guy who came up with this idea is a sociologist named Erving Goffman, a name that you've probably never heard, although you're aware of some of the nomenclature he's used, because the whole idea of saving face, losing face, that whole terminology and that conceptualization of what can happen during interactions, all of that comes from Erving Goffman. He's the guy who invents those terms. And he's the guy who invents or who sort of creates this way of analyzing interactions, impression management. Erving Goffman says there are 3 types of symbols that we use to try to influence other people's idea of us, or to use his term, to try to manage their impression. First type of symbol is appearance, and what you can think about this as is like, I'm wearing a collared shirt right now. When I was in New Mexico, I obviously wasn't, but I started out the class wearing this, and all of your teachers will generally, to some degree or another, dress differently in class than they would at home. Now, why is that? They're trying to look professional. But what they're trying to do, according to Erving Goffman, is they're trying to get you to think they are professional. They are trying to manage your impression of them so that you define them as a professional person. You do that, and then the expectation is that you will treat them in a way that conforms to that definition of them. So appearance. The idea here is that even if you're a person, and this is not meaning to tell you that you're not an individual and you're not original. I'm not trying to say that. The idea here, the implication, is that any way that you dress is, for the most part, designed to elicit reactions in other people. It may be that you want to be attractive to other people. It may be that you want to be scary to other people. It may be that you want to look impressive to other people. But in any case, the decisions that you're making about your appearance, whether you want to get tattoos, dye your hair, get piercings, whatever, that you are using symbols, each of those things holds meaning, that you are trying to influence other people's impression of you through using those symbols. So that's what appearance is about. Second, the term he used is manner, but what we want to think about is just behavioral symbols. So the fact that I'm constantly talking with my hands, when in class, in a classroom, this makes more sense because I'm a pretty animated teacher, so I'm constantly using hand gestures. I'm walking back and forth across the room. I cover the whiteboard with writing and stuff like that. But it's very dynamic. And what Goffman would say is that to some degree, what I'm trying to do is communicate to get people. I'm trying to communicate symbols in order to get people to define me a certain way. I want them to define me as interesting, and that then is the reason that I act the way that I act. And we can see that in less in situations in any element of society where you walk all like kind of tough, or you have a tough look on your face or whatever, or you are very quick to smile, whatever it is. Goffman would say these are symbols that you are giving off in order to try to get somebody to act toward you in a certain way. Now, importantly, he wouldn't say that this is all calculated, that you drew up a game plan the night before and decided, I'm going to dress like this and walk like this, but that at some level, you're trying to get people to act toward you the way that you want them to act toward you. And in order to do that, you've got to communicate a certain idea of who you are to them. You want them to define you a certain way. And so you have an appearance that is a certain way, you have a manner that's a certain way. Okay, last of our three types of symbols, the setting. Setting is probably something that's a little bit harder to use. The idea of, again, using a whiteboard kind of gets at it. But you can think about a person who's taking up a lot of space in their setting, who like puts their stuff out and splays themselves all over a couch. They are trying to communicate a degree of control, of power in a situation. And that would be a way of using the setting. All right, that's basically it for impression management. One main idea that's not super difficult to get, three types of symbols that are used to communicate it. And the idea here is, once again, that all of this is happening while we are conforming. We're still conforming to a script, but in the process, it's not just that we are passive sheep who are being herded through these boxes and tunnels of norms. We're calculating, and we still are interested in what's going on, and we are trying to make our lives as good as possible by influencing other people to define us in a certain way. All right, that's it for impression management, and that actually is it for the interaction order. Again, to just sort of sum this up, informal interactions that proceed according to script if you don't know the people very well, proceed according to group expectations if you do, and even though that conformity is happening, we are trying to influence other people in order to act toward us in a certain way. Next time we will get into formal situations in social institutions, so I'll see you then.